Welcome to the Blue Watch, your backstage pass to the lives of frontline officers and the leadership steering the way. I'm Chris Casto. Joining us today is author, Marine, and former officer Scott Medlin. Scott hosts the 10 Code podcast and is a nationally recognized speaker on police wellness. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Chris, I appreciate it very much.
Tell me a little bit about your journey as a police officer. How did it lead to where you are today doing the podcast, national speaking, and writing several books?
Being a lot busier than I thought I'd be at this point. Anyway, let's see. Did you start in 2007?
Yeah, started in about
Okay. All right.
2007.
Okay, that's when I started. So I went to rookie school in the summer of '07 and got sworn shortly after that. Actually got was lucky enough to get sworn before graduation, so I was able to get graduate in uniform. But anyway, I was really excited because I got sworn in as an officer in my hometown where I had dreamed of working as a police officer. So it really was a dream come true. And then in 2000, early 2009, I mean, not even a year and a half after getting sworn in, I quit and I went to another department because I got in with a group of negative officers and they led me to make a negative decision, which I own as my decision, but it was through negative influence. So I go to this other department, and about 3 months into working at that other department, I'm not knocking them. They were good, but I realized I made a mistake. I was not pursuing another opportunity. I was running from a negative emotion, and I begged the hometown department to take me back. And after an hour and a half of being chewed out on an oral board, which I fully deserved, they did take me back.
Well,
They
it's
took me
interesting. A
back.
lot. It's interesting. A lot of officers do this. It's the grass is greener mentality. They think
Mhm.
it's going to be better at this other department. I've had officers leave our police department in Austin to go to the FBI, and they're like, "This is not exactly the best thing. I don't like this." So I get it. I get it.
Yeah, no, you definitely have to make sure that you're pursuing an opportunity and all for the right reasons. And I was just running from a negative emotion, and it was a horrible decision, horrible mistake. I hate I even made it, but I learned from it and I talk about it to this day. But I worked for my hometown department for several years after returning, and I didn't let the negative crowd get a hold of me the way they did the first time. I'm not saying I never complained or got caught up in the gossip, but overall, didn't let that negative route ever take me back. But then in in the summer of 2020, it just came to a point where my wife and I realized that for our family, me working full time in law enforcement, particularly if it came to working my way up the ladder in the ranks, it just wasn't going to work out for our family. And I had to put my family first. So I left full time law enforcement, went part time for 2 years, but then we moved out of the state and I didn't pursue joining law enforcement after that. But what I did start somewhat in 2020 when I left full time was really focusing on this mental health and personal development and stress management that hit me like a ton of bricks back in January of 2020 when I had never had any training about mental health or anything like that. And I didn't know that police were dying more by their own hands. And
Mhm.
it's nothing new, but it was new to me 13 years in the profession learning that. And that didn't sit well with me. And I have seen myself struggle. I've seen other friends struggle. And I was like, we don't have to settle for this. And it doesn't have to be this way. So I wrote my first book in April of 2020 and came out with 101 health tips for police officers shortly after that. And then I've been writing, and I've been very fortunate over the last 2 years to speak across the country, literally from coast to coast, and present the 10 Code Mindset course, and really do my best to empower officers through not only knowledge but sharing my story as well, and be like, hey, you're not on your own if you're struggling. You're really not. You can work your way out of it, and here's how you can continue to do it.
No, absolutely, and that's a great thing to be able to bring that information to light. One of the things that kind of struck me, you talking about how a lot of officers they lose their life more to their own hand than even shootings or car
Mhm.
crashes on the street. Um, some of the statistics I found like 69% greater risk of suicide than the general population. And the biggest danger area, and this is the one that really caught me whenever I was looking into it, was that the dangerous part for officers is the 5 years leading up to retirement when you're looking at retirement, and then the 5 years after you retire, like directly after when you're cut off from that law enforcement support system.
Yeah, it's very tough because some feel like there's no purpose or mission for them after the career. And just because some other retiree doesn't have a problem with that, doesn't mean another one does. Like I'm saying, unfortunately, what I am seeing is a conversation of, well, I've enjoyed retirement. It's been great. It's like, okay, I'm happy for you, but let's not let your experience cement in your mind that nobody else should be going through anything hard, or how could they be going through. So it's like the ones that feel like there's no purpose or mission afterwards, they see how, well, sometimes we see how happy people appear, but they might not be happy. But they feel like, oh my gosh, am I the only one that feels this way? Can I turn to other people saying, hey, I'm not doing so well with this feeling like I'm surrendering my identity and my whole purpose and passion? That's a very tough place to be. I went through that not through retirement, but in 2016 when I worked on the canine unit, but my wife and I were growing apart. And after 3.5 years of being on the canine unit, she eventually got to a point where she was thinking, where she told me when we were riding down the road one day, she said, I'm thinking of doing all this on my own. And we had our first child at that point. And now I know she didn't mean divorce, but I didn't know that back then. But either way, we were growing apart. So I resigned from the canine and I felt lost inside, absolutely lost. So I feel when some of these people are getting close to retirement, I've been there where you feel like your identity is being taken away. And I caution every police officer about that. Like, please look at it as what you do and who you are as that servant. And you can definitely serve people outside of the profession in a lot of ways you never thought possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that we can do, that we can take the skills that we've learned in our departments and in our careers and actually, use them outside in our post-career time. And it works out great for a lot of people. It might not be the
Yep.
best thing for everyone, but it's good for a lot of different people in different different situations. Now, let me ask you, diving into the mental health resilience, and I'm sure you've heard this before. I've heard you speak on this before on some of the videos I found online, is those dreaded words, I'm fine. And, people say that all the time. And we see that on officers going into like, the scene of a officer involved shooting, and they're just walking around, just one of the most traumatic times that something could have just happened in an officer's life. And they're walking around saying, I'm fine. It, why do we do this to ourselves?
I think if anyone were to say something like, this is bothering me, or this is making me sad, or wow, that was really, really hard, then one, there's that fear of judgment, or there is that stigma behind it. And I know this because that was recently validated, not necessarily with OISs, but policing in general, where I think it was back during the summer, Police One did a survey of over 2,800 police officers, and over 50% of them said that there was still a stigma associated with mental health. That is not good. So there's that stigma part, but also, we're trained to be aware of external risks and external threats that could present themselves on the job. Say you get out with a suspect, and it's from like a larceny incident, and they match the description of the suspect. You get out with them, and then they blade their body, start looking around, patting their waist, getting fidgety. It's like, okay, you should pick up on that behavior instinctively, but we're not trained overall effectively or enough on how to recognize internal threats, internal risks going on within us. See, I for the longest time during my career, I would go out with my wife and our friends, and I, of course, had to make sure that my back was to the wall and I could see the door whenever we would sit down at a restaurant. I'm not knocking that tactic. I still do it to this day. But the problem is, I couldn't stop watching the door. I couldn't stop watching other people. And my wife, time and time again, she'd snap her fingers and be like, hey, guess what? You're doing that thing again. And I would say, well, I'm fine. I'm aware of my surroundings. No, I was going through hypervigilance, and I was still living in stress mode,
Mhm.
and literally was just physically with my wife, but not mentally present. Thus, one of the contributing factors to us growing apart. See, that's the thing. We've got to be aware of and more knowledgeable of internal symptoms that can happen, hypervigilance, impulsivity, all these different things that we as humans can experience. Thus, if we don't know about it, yeah, we're going to think we're okay and everybody else is the problem. So that's how we got to work past this whole I am fine thing.
Oh, I agree with you. It's interesting you said the hypervigilance thing, and you mentioned the sitting with your back to the wall and looking at the door. I'd always do that. And actually, for a long time, my wife would just sit there and be like, "Oh, you want this seat, don't you?" It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Absolutely, I want that damn seat. You know what? I absolutely do want that share.
Right. No, I mean, I still do that to this day, but if I go out with people and they all sit down, I don't do like I used to do where I would say, "Hey, I need that chair." It's
Mm.
I have sat at restaurants with my back to the door and I have walked out perfectly okay at the end of
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's interesting. It's like I got into this conversation with my wife about it. Was that, I was on this planet for 21 years and I did not have a gun. I
hmm
didn't have a pistol with me for those 21 years. And then, end up being a cop, having a gun all the time. And I would carry it with me, like, going to restaurants or going out. And it got to the point where I was like, why? And this might be, and again, this is for me. This is not for everyone else. This is for me.
hmm
And my choice was, I'm just not going to carry off duty. And my choice for that was specific to be, I want to have time when I'm not a cop to
hmm
be here with my family. And that was my choice. Now, like I said, it's not for everybody. There's a lot of reasons to carry off duty. I totally get it. That's a personal choice for me. But like you said, it's that hypervigilance thing. It's a physical way for me to detach myself from that mindset.
hmm Well, that's self-awareness on your part. And see, that's the problem where if someone's always aware of external risks and external threats, to which we're trained to do, but if you're not aware of what's going on internally and you're not looking at yourself in the mirror and thinking, okay, I'm actually not good with this. Like there's an impulsive behavior of judgment or gambling or drinking. It's like you've got to realize when something's not right with you. It's not always everybody else's problem or they don't see what you're going through and can't relate. Therefore, how dare they question how you are and how negative you're being, stuff like that. We got to be aware of how we are doing inside, and it's sometimes you're not fine. And as the saying goes, I'm not down with cliches, but it is what it is. It's okay to not be okay. You just can't stay there. But the thing is, like people hear that phrase and they're like, okay, well, how do I get out of it? Well, it takes action and it takes different action than what you've been doing that unfortunately got you where you are. And that's part of the 10 code mindset presentation is like all these different action items that people can work on, thus creating essentially fulfillment and even a life you never expected.
Mm. And it's good that you brought up drinking because I mean it's no secret officers drink. We
hmm
do. Officers drink. Alcohol is often used by officers as a way to de-stress at the end of a long day. But what I find interesting is that even though we all know that alcoholism is so prevalent among police officers, right? We know that officers get DWIs that ruin their careers. What do we do on Christmas? We
Yeah.
go to these Christmas parties, and one of the white elephant gifts, what's the first thing that we go to look for? We look for
Yeah. It's
booze.
it's it's the liquor or the whiskey. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
it's like we're feeding the machine that's killing us. I mean,
hmm
it's kind of like we need to take, like you said, that hey, what am I going to do to change this mindset? And
hmm
maybe it's not getting alcohol for Christmas.
Yeah. Not getting alcohol for Christmas, but also the whole mentality of, hey man, if you're bothered by something, I got a cold one with your name on it waiting on you. It's on me, that kind of thing. I think in the very beginning, during the rookie school, it has to be stressed that the fact that alcohol is not a coping mechanism. It's not. And I I I say that when I go out and speak and I say, please don't throw anything at me because like it is looked at as a way to cope, but it is a depressant. It is a drug. We got to keep it in perspective as to what it is. I'm not saying don't ever drink. I mean, if you want to go drink, that's your thing, but please don't ever let it be your refuge to quote cope with the job because it doesn't help in any way. It's not healthy for us. It is a toxin. And but I did get to wondering why are we so drawn to alcohol? And I was reading a book by Tony Robbins called Awaken the Giant Within. And he pointed out in that book something that just made a light bulb go off for me. And that is the fact that we as human beings seek pleasure and run from pain. Like that's how we're wired. So obviously, what creates this instant sense of pleasure is alcohol, but it may drown out the pain in the short term, but long term, it causes pain. Therefore, it's more essential that we do things that cause, quote, short term pain, as in a hard workout or writing down what you're grateful for or your goals and your intentions. It doesn't cause the instant pleasure like alcohol does, but it creates lasting pleasure. It helps you avoid the long-term pain. So we just need to understand that as humans, it's best to stay away from what causes us the instant pleasure, such as the alcohol or the binge eating, gambling, sex, this kind of thing. If we're doing it in a way that it's addicting and a bad habit, then it's causing long-term pain, and we have to understand that.
Oh yeah, and there's reasons. There's stereotypes for a reason. So you have the
Mhm.
stereotype of the cop sitting there drinking or married to a stripper or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like
man.
I mean
Wow.
that's like
Yeah.
that. Those are there's always there because I mean
Hmm.
in it's just so prevalent in our and like you said, it's a way to chase away the pain, but also gives you that instant gratification. And I think that that's one of the things that an officer sees like these crazy calls and they go to sees the dead body or whatever and it's like oh I got to get rid of this. Well, they don't have time to go to therapy this night or whatever they
Hmm.
or whatever it is. They just yeah, here a couple of sips of whiskey and get it done. Yeah.
Right. Well, unfortunately, also some will, and I've been told this that, well, it helps me get to sleep.
Mm.
It may help you get to sleep, but it totally disrupts our ability to sleep like optimally.
Hmm.
Therefore, that's a contributing factor to the quote long-term pain. So please, if you're saying, well, I need it to get to sleep, we got to work, you got to work past that. There's ways to do it, but that's another thing I've heard is, well, I need it for sleep. That's not true. You don't.
Yeah, if you use the word need along with alcohol at any point, you
Yeah,
need to go seek some help because you're at a point where
good
you're
way. Yeah,
already
good way to
needing it.
put it.
I'll be that's where I would look at it is if you think that you need it, that's when you absolutely need to seek help
Hmm.
because you're at a point already where you are either at a functioning alcoholic or you are full blown. And that's
Yeah,
just my opinion on it, just
yeah,
what I've seen.
yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, if you are in a bad place where it's a habit and or you are straight up addicted, no shaming yourself. Seriously, you
Oh.
won't shame your way out of the habit. You won't shame your way out of the addiction. I've battled, unfortunately, I've battled an addiction 2 years into my police career. I shamed myself like crazy. I was like, why is this happening to me? I can't believe this is happening to me. Scott, you're such a bad person for letting this happen to you. And it never helped. It's whenever I gave myself forgiveness and said, okay, I have a problem. I need to get help. And I made the call and then got treatment. But it's the same thing with alcoholism. It's please do not shame yourself. And if anyone shames you, you don't have to listen to them.
Hmm.
You will be stronger on the other side of that addiction. I promise you. Just put in the work.
And we're talking about it being like tough calls that cause this either. It's not just tough calls that cause a lot of the stress. I think organizational stress actually causes more and is worse than
Right.
on your mental health than even calls on the street. Is that something that you've seen?
Oh, 100%. I even took a poll on LinkedIn one time and got plenty of responses, and it was overwhelmingly organizational stress is the number one stressor to a lot of police officers. But the thing is, it's kind of like, I mean, you have that stressor, and I'm not undermining it, but you still go out there and see some things that your human brain never wants you to see. And if you're playing a movie over and over in your mind about a traumatic event you experienced, whether in your personal life and or on the job, in addition to organizational stress, and you're not quote coping in a healthy way, and you're going around saying I'm fine. Meanwhile, relationships are falling apart. You're having sleeping issues, or you're having stomach digestive problems, or whatever it could be. Man, it's really really bad. So I would say if anyone's really feeling the stress of the organization, what happens within the four walls, not only to find friends outside of the profession, but find the right friends outside of the profession. If you have people that don't work in law enforcement, but all they talk about is negative things, that's not helping you out. Find a group who will uplift you, and they create great energy when you're with them, and you really enjoy the time with them. And they don't work in law enforcement. There's nothing to talk about job related, but also take the time during work to realize, okay, I am here today and there's nothing I can do about that. Like it is my job. I have to be here, but you should say you get to be here. You want to be here, regardless of the people that are causing the stress within the four walls. What can you do today? Like it sounds so corny, but it's true. If you can just focus on your span of control, what can I do? What opportunities can I make for myself in service to others? What can I do? And how can I get the heck away from the negativity? Because there's always a way, even if you have to be, hey, I got to go to the bathroom right quick. Just get yourself away from it. Uh, do something. Always take action. It's absolutely necessary because if you just listen to the negativity or you get sucked into the gossip or you let this micromanager or supervisor get the best of you and they're living rent free in your head and you think that, oh, I'll be all right, you won't be unless you're actively taking the right steps to take care of yourself. I know I went on a tangent there, but this is something I'm very passionate about because I can't stand to see how officers feel so helpless when there's adverse conditions within the four walls, and when you have more in control than what you originally or could innately believe when there's toxicity around.
Yeah, well, also step out of those four walls. I mean, when you were
Hmm.
an officer, did you have like your work phone? Did you have like your email, your work email? Like you always constantly
Yeah,
like checking the info?
I turned the notifications off. Like if I know officers kept their notifications on because at that time when I was still working, they'd give out emails about extra off-duty assignments and stuff
Yep.
like that. Man, I turned it off. I turned the notifications off. And of course, they would say 30 minutes after some big email would go out, hey, Scott, did you see that email? Like, no.
Um,
Well, why didn't you see it? Well, I don't have notifications on my phone. I mean, I don't see whenever email comes through. Well, why didn't you get, well, if it's something that important that they need to call me.
hmm Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But my commander currently is, so I'm a lieutenant, right? My commander,
Uh-huh.
starts texting me. It's my day off, and he's like, "Hey, did you see this email?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I don't look at my email when I'm off, sir." It's
Right.
like, and
Yeah.
I told him, I said, "You have to set those boundaries for yourself and for your family." And I think that
Yeah.
setting those healthy boundaries, either if it's not checking your email constantly while you're off, if it's, hey, if something's important, call or text me, but otherwise, I'll see you next week. It's like make sure
That's
you take
awesome.
that weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you take the weekend. And I know that it's no secret to anybody at this point that social media
Hmm.
it puts our brain in this dopamine loop and it can distract us and it causes us to get a rush and it can become addicting and a bad habit. Email is the same exact thing when it comes to how our brains react to it. It's a dopamine thing. It can distract you. Have you ever noticed that some people just have to check their email within the first hour of waking up? It's the same kind of thing as social media. So it's really important to be careful with how much you're checking email because a lot of times habits that are easy to get into, same thing with the alcohol. It's like it leads to lasting pain. It leads to you not being able to stay focused, or it leads to you thinking about work when you're not actually working. And there's nothing you can do about whatever's going on at the PD and why that email was sent out in the first place.
Mhm.
Instead, when you're focusing on your habits, make the make the choices that you decide upon that lead to good results. In other words, good habits. Make those easier and make the bad stuff harder to access by, in this case, turning off those notifications. It's making it harder to view your email. Therefore, you're able to focus on other things that are better for you.
Yeah, and go out, like you said, make friends outside of policing. Because I mean,
Hmm.
imagine once you retire, all those emails that you're desperately like zoned in to look at, they're gone.
Yeah,
You're not going to be getting those anymore. So what's going to fulfill your life? So
very
having
true.
people, meeting people outside of law enforcement, that'll help you afterwards. That'll help you throughout your career. Uh,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So what are some things that officers can do to be more resilient? You mentioned that the framework of the 10 Code podcast or the 10 Code that you,
Mindset. Yeah.
yeah. So
10 code
tell me,
mindset.
tell me a
Yep.
little about that.
Well, it's one of those things where I kind of already brought it up where if we do what's easy, it chances are it's not going to help us. So I'm all for officers doing things that are difficult in the sense of it's not always something you're going to want to do. And the first thing that comes to mind is exercise. It's no secret at this point, at least it shouldn't be any kind of r- revealing moment that exercise helps your mental health just as much as it does your physical health. Eating well helps your physical health in addition to your mental health. We get that. But that's not always easy to do. So it does take persistence, discipline, and consistency. And the good thing is certain things like meditation, journaling. Yes, I said it. Yeah, just hear me out. Don't press stop
I'm
yet.
married. No, no, no. I'm married to a therapist. I totally get it. You go on.
At first, see, I battled depression several years ago. And a psychologist told me, he said, you've been coming to me for a while, but I can't change your way of thinking. That's up to you. And I thought, oh, wow, yeah, he's right. I'm glad he was blunt with me about that. And he said, I'm not sure you're ready for this, but I'm going to give you an exercise and you're going to do it. And I was like, yes, sir, I will do it. He said, you're going to write down three things at the end of the day that you're grateful for. He said, you're not going to think about them. You're not going to say them. You are going to write them down in complete sentences. And he said, even if you've had a bad day, find something to be grateful for. And I was like, this is stupid. Won't work. How the heck is this going to get me out of depression? and, but he was the pro. I was not. And I did have to change my ways.
Hmm.
So I started writing, and long story short, 30 days later, I started to notice that I was noticing the blessings in my life and feeling appreciative of them, even though they had always been there. I was just so drowned in the negativity. It just was a unhealthy perspective.
Hmm.
And I did more research on what writing can do for us. It's not just writing down what you're grateful for. If you write down a specific goal and how you're going to get there, that is cementing it into your mind with a heck of a lot more clarity than just thinking to yourself, well, I want to earn more money, I want to lose weight, whatever the goal is for you or how you feel about something. Writing helps a lot because the more clear you are, that's the better. I mean, you can't go about tackling tasks and goals and ambitions in the way you want to feel with a cluttered mind. It doesn't work that way. So writing things down, and then in 2017, after a year of just having felt lost inside because of that resignation from the canine unit, and I was working at the schools, and I did my best to show up for those students and put a smile on my face, but I was crushed inside. And I realized I can't stay in this funk. Like I just can't because I was still battling resentment with my wife. And I had heard about meditation, but I bashed it. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm not going to do that type of thing. Why would I sit there for an hour, hour and a half and just go, oh,
That's what everybody thinks of it as is just you're sitting there and you're
exactly,
staring.
exactly. But then when I got out of my own way and got out of my own head, and I actually learned, well, you can just sit there for 3 minutes with calming music and someone guiding you through a gratitude exercise. That's meditation. But the thing is, it's just like it's just like if you haven't been working out a lot, you can't go to the CrossFit gym and say, "Give me everything you got." Because you're going to increase your risk of injury. You're going to get so sore, you probably won't go back for another week or two. Therefore, you lost the benefit of that initial workout. You got to start slow. Like I said, meditation is like working out. You got to start slow because it can throw off your nervous system and you have to rewire thinking. And when you rewire your thinking, your body's also going along with this process as well. And it's hard to let some things go within the body.
Hmm.
But I started meditating 5, 10 minutes through guided meditations on YouTube. And all of a sudden, I'm realizing, particularly when I'm visualizing being happy again or goals I can achieve in the future, I'm getting so present to those thoughts and I feel the emotions of them.
Hmm.
And I open my eyes and I'm acting forward based on an emotion from a thought. And it was amazing that I started to actually achieve things that I was thinking about through meditation. And all of a sudden, the past of having to resign from canine, yes, it still hurts to this day, but it doesn't hold me back. So I love the equation of or the analogy of meditation is like mental gardening.
Hmm.
Professor Marty Seligman, when the University of Pennsylvania, he said you have to pull the weeds, you have to tend to the plants, which are the positive, ambitious, hopeful thoughts in your mind. Grow those because the weeds are always going to be there. And if you're not careful, they're just going to suck you in. And and
Hmm.
and you know, essentially as I learned after I read Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, your thoughts lead to your feelings, and your feelings lead to your actions, and actions lead to the results you have in life. You have the ability to change your thoughts, and guided meditation is a good way to do that. And there's other things we can do, but it's just these things have a compounding effect so that regardless of what's going on within those four walls, regardless of what call you went on, regardless of whatever kind of career setback you have, at least you'll know I'm in control of certain things that I can do. And yeah, things may downright suck at times, but I can still stay strong through the storm.
Oh yeah. And it's funny you mentioned meditation and the breathing thing. It's something that we actually started in our department doing from our cadet class, and it was breathing, and it was like box breathing, 4 count
Heck yeah.
type of,
Yeah.
but it was they did it along with tactics. So along with the shooting, going to the range to go, firearms, it was along with that. And it was showing that this breathing actually helps center you for and it gave them better proficiency, but it also helped teach them how to keep calm in high stressor situations. Another thing was that I actually did this for one of my shifts when I was a patrol sergeant. Was I came in to show up one day and I said, "Okay, guys, I'm gonna play this meditation. We're gonna go through this." And it was a day shift, so all the guys were like, they've been on for 10 years. They were like, "Ah, this is
Yeah.
bullshit." It's
Yeah,
like
of course. Yeah.
so I started putting play, and it was the F it meditation. I don't know if you ever heard this one or
Uh,
not. It's on YouTube.
okay. Okay.
It's the FUK meditation.
Oh,
So, but it was funny because it was like they were like, "Oh, this is stupid." And they start listening, and they're like, "The calming waves," and then this person saying, "Just ignore all these soul-sucking bullshit," all this. And it was, but it was just the way that they kind of responded. And I had an officer come up to me at the end of it, and he said, "Sarge, that was the funniest thing, but honestly, I was so calm by the end of that. Can you text me
awesome.
that link?"
Awesome.
So it
Awesome.
was a way to kind of just bring it to them. But I agree with you, meditation definitely helps. And that's great that it was able to kind of help with you as well.
Oh, it did. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's other things we can do as well in addition to writing and meditation. It's really focus on what your habits are and understand what cues the habit and or in other words, like what triggers it, and then what do you typically do when the trigger happens, and then but what's the end result? Like with me, if I'm not careful when I get stressed, I like to snack. And I didn't really know that or until I started looking like self-awareness and I was like, okay, let's evaluate what kind of habits I'm in that are not serving me well. I was like, I know I snack, but I
Mhm.
didn't realize the trigger was getting stressed or feeling overwhelmed. And then all of a sudden I was thinking, okay, well, after the action of snacking, I there's the guilt and the, oh, I can't believe I did it again. Therefore, we got to make the bad habits hard. I, I, I mean, I stopped buying Girl Scout cookies and not even having the stuff in the house because I know if it's in the house, I'm going to go snack on it. So I don't even have that kind of junk in the house anymore. Therefore, making the bad habit less accessible. So, and essentially, there is that saying in law enforcement, the military, under pressure, you don't rise to your expectations. You sink to the level of your training.
Mhm.
Well, our habits are no different in moments of pressure and moments in our life. We always sink to our level of our habits. That's essentially how your life is going to be based on your habits, because so much of what we do during the day is are things based on habit that we don't even think about we're doing. So it's just something to consider in addition to all these different modalities and coping mechanisms that we can implement.
We have the ability to take charge of these things. We have the ability to change these things. You have the ability to improve your mental health just by thinking about it and just by being intentional about how you do it.
Absolutely. And if I encourage any officer, if you start doing things on your own, like journaling or the meditation, but it's really throwing you off and it's not helping, then there's nothing wrong with going to seek professional assistance. And I get it. So many people are maybe your listeners right now, at least one of them is thinking, man, if I do that, Scott, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to be put on desk duty. My job's on the line. How the heck are people going to look at me and say, well, this man can handle, or man or woman can't handle a call. They have to go to get professional assistance. Here's the deal. I didn't tell anyone when I got professional assistance. I did it outside on my own dime. But here's what helped was the fact that through neurolinguistic programming, any bad incident that I went through, particularly dangerous incidents, and they would just keep playing on replay over and over in my mind because my mind was trying to rehearse, okay, heaven forbid we go through this again. How can we react better? Well, you got to remember, just like I said earlier, every thought comes with an emotion for
Mm,
99% of people. So chances are this applies to you if you're listening. But if you're reliving a traumatic incident over and over again, there's that emotion with it. Guess what? That's putting your body in stress response, and we weren't built to last that way. We weren't. And through neurolinguistic programming, the doctor was able to help me step out from reliving something first person and thinking about it first person and think about it third person so that I could see myself in it, but I knew I wasn't in it, like it was in the past. And therefore, that emotional detachment happened. And I wasn't feeling the emotional response whenever I would think back to something. And this helped me a lot when, particularly when I got home from Iraq on my second deployment, 2005. So this is something I encourage you to do because that type of stuff oftentimes requires professional assistance. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not going to go get the help, you might get to a point where you're going to need the help because you got in trouble at work because you reacted out of a bad emotion and now you're in trouble because you didn't go get the help you needed. So I encourage people never overlook nor underestimate professional assistance, but do your due diligence and research to make sure you're getting someone who's good and qualified, particularly culturally competent in law enforcement. You're wired for it. You're excited about it when you start, but you're a human. And
hmm
what you experience in law enforcement, it can wear you down no matter how tough you think you are. And it upsets me to this day that this is not still part of a curriculum for many rookie schools.
hmm
They may have an officer come in and talk for an hour about some story of that or some critical incident they went through and how it adversely affected them, but gotta have more than that. Gotta have more than that to really understand, break down the psychology of it, prove to them that they're human and they're not immune, and then start focusing on the solutions in addition to the self-awareness. It's really bothersome to me that this is still not there's not a lot of time for this in the state academies, and uh, I know they're on a tight schedule, but it really needs to be more of an emphasis because think about it this way. Okay, we don't want police officers dying by their own hands, obviously. We don't want them going through the mental health issues that they are more at risk of going through compared to the general public. But also, if we really take the time during the academies to take several hours to instill this and educate them on it, you're setting them up to be less of a liability out there in the public as well. Like healthier cops is healthier for the public as well. So,
hmm
you know, it's not just about us, it's about other people. And I really believe that the more mentally sound an officer is, the better they're going to be for others.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also consider the percentage that you're more likely to die by your own hand in this field, in
Yeah.
suicide and depression and having all these issues, than
Yeah.
you are to encounter somebody and have a use of force, deadly force situation.
Yep.
And in reality, there's less police shootings than there are police suicides. So we have to, be aware of this. And we have to focus our attention on what is and prioritize what's needed for these officers.
Yeah. We absolutely do. And it's amazing how an officer will go into shift and say, I hope I can make it home alive. And I'm going to do whatever I can to do and need to do to make it home alive. But what are you doing to make sure you stay alive outside of work as well?
Yeah.
Because the threat is there.
Yeah,
Nobody's immune.
and just what you just said is like imagine the stress that a person brings into their life every single day by thinking that. People don't go to job like sitting behind a desk and be like, "Oh, I hope I don't die today." No,
Right?
this is a job where you actually have that somebody has that thought on,
Yeah.
if that's a continual thought, that sucks. It's interesting. So you said that were a Marine, you were in Iraq. It when you I've heard this before, and please correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to be insensitive about this, but there are people who say like, "Oh, I was served in the military and I was out and all this stuff." And yeah, battlegrounds are fucking hell. I agree with you,
Mhm.
but compare that to the stress also that you have for psychological stress of a 25, 30-year career as a police officer, day in, day out, seeing the different traumas that you have. It's not as many big T's as you might see, big traumas as you might see on the battlefield, but those collective micro traumas will mess you up over that long term.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, you hit it on the head. And a combat deployment, not undermining what people have been through, but for the most part, it's a short-lived part of your life, whereas these officers are going, well, I mean, just like you, Chris. I mean, you're coming up on 20 years. I mean, that's a long time to be experiencing chronic stress and traumatic incidents. Oh my gosh, it wears you down at times if you're not careful and not taking the right consistent action of healthy ways of coping.
I know that you do a lot of speaking engagements across the country. You've done several books. What is one of the greatest lessons that you would like people to take home with them? Of the things that you've learned about coping and officer wellness and that, helping out others, what would you like them to take with them?
Many people in America go through life in survival mode. And in law enforcement, if you're not careful, you get stuck in survival mode. And even though you're doing something that you feel called to do, living in survival mode is, well, it's existing. I don't want you to get to that point. And the more we grow as people, the more progress we see in our own lives, the more we can give to others. And that's where a lot of happiness in life really comes from. So I always encourage people to keep growing, keep learning, not just in the profession, but how you are as a person. You could always be in better physical shape. You could always pick up another book and change your life through after reading and learning that knowledge and taking the right action. There's always ways to keep growing, to avoid going through life in survival mode. Now, obviously, the ruts are going to happen, but work your way out of them by continuous action. And a lot of these things that I've talked about here with you, Chris, they have a compounding effect where if you just keep doing them, they'll help you out in the long run. But the other thing that I've really made a point to talk about is as hard as it is to discuss. And I know this hits home for you as well, Chris, because of I know Austin PD recently lost an officer to suicide within the last year or two. I remember reading at least one due to the fact the threat is so prevalent for officers. It has been for many years. I encourage every officer to not only when it comes to their career remember why they got started. Like that's a common thing when you're talking about burnout. It's people say remember why you got started. I suggest and encourage police to take it up a notch and remember their reasons for living day in and day out and put meaning to them and anchor them in. Anchor them in because there's always a reason for living. And when if heaven forbid, you start getting those bad, dark thoughts, you'll have your anchor. And those are just thoughts that you do not have to believe. And in fact, they are not valid. They are a lie because like I said, there's reasons for living. Do the mental gardening and foster those thoughts of hope, resilience, ambition, positive self talk. Heck, you can change your language, it can change your life. But remember your reasons for living. And even if you're doing fine, remember them because you never know what's going to hit you in life the next day. You never know. So stay grounded, stay solid in that. And we can start to bring these numbers down that we're facing now, in addition to also being there for each other.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being here. And everybody, thank you for joining us today on the Blue Watch. Please share and subscribe for more leadership insights from the front line and check out our website, thebluewatch.com. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.